So in this video I'm going over building the dwarf wall for my workshop. There'll be some points on why it's needed, my experience laying bricks for the first time, and I'll finish off by going over the costs. So a common method for building the walls of a summer house or workshop build like mine would be to use concrete bolts through the timber wall bottom plate to attach it straight down to the foundation slab. But then something that's seemingly overlooked is that any external timber should really be at least 15 centimeters above ground level. One reason for this is avoiding the effects of rain splash. When it rains, while most of the rain will run down and off the cladding, a portion of it will splash up, leaving the area wetter for longer. You'll notice many shop-bought sheds will have floors and lower cladding boards that tend to be the first to rot because of this. A few ways to get around this is to raise your workshop a bit higher so any external timber is away from the ground, but that may take away from your internal ceiling height. That's not so great if you're like me and working under the 2.5 meter permitted development height. Then there's the fact you'll have a large step or possibly a deck with steps, which may be fine in your case, but for a workshop setting, having the entrance threshold as low to the ground as possible makes moving items in and out more easy. If you have your wall studs wrapped in a breathable membrane to keep the water out, as I will, and you're not using wood cladding, this may be a non-issue as there won't really be any external timber 15 centimeters from ground height. I'm planning on having composite cladding, but still went with the dwarf wall design just in case I changed my mind last minute, or down the line if I ever want to replace the cladding. Another bonus is the extra 15 centimeters at the bottom will allow for better airflow between the cladding and workshop walls. I'll go into more detail on moisture control and how the walls and roof are designed later on in the series. This is my first time laying bricks, so it was pretty slow and cumbersome to start, but it didn't take long to get the hang of it, so here's how I went about it. I started by folding over the DPM with a few cuts at the corners and DPM tape so I had a good surface to work on. When setting the size of the workshop, the dwarf wall will likely influence the width and depth, as this is because it's much easier to have the width and depth be a multiple of brick length plus taking the 1 centimeter of mortar into account between each brick, instead of having to cut bricks to fit the foundation slab. If you don't do this, you could end up with small slithers of bricks, which is not ideal. It'll be easier to cut the timber framing to size than it is the bricks, but you could always have slightly bigger or smaller gaps by a few mil between the bricks, which over a few meters could finish you at a specific size you're after. But you'll still want to keep the gap sizes consistent on all your walls for aesthetics. I set up the string line around the workshop around 7.5 centimeters above the DPM to account for the brick height and a centimeter of mortar. I did this by putting some fence pins down in the rough areas where the lines would go, and then used some of the extra bricks to push and fine-tune the lines to where they needed to be. I would make the foundation slab a few centimeters too large, and there's a few reasons for this. The first is, when folding the DPM over, it has a tendency to have a little lip going over the corner, with it being a thick plastic that's not always the most malleable. A centimeter or so back from the edge means that it has more chance to flatten out and be easier to work on. The next reason is it gives a little wiggle room if your slab isn't 100% square. When you set your string lines up, you can use that extra room to move them in and out to make sure that the dwarf wall is square. With that, my front and back wall had an extra centimeter to play with, and the side walls 5 centimeters, as we didn't bother cutting down the 4.8 meter shuttering, as it was already close enough to the 4.7 meters we were after. It all worked out fine for me, though I would have preferred the 5 centimeter wiggle room on all sides if I were to do it over. I mixed the mortar at a ratio of 4:1, so 4 parts sand and 1 part cement. To get the ratios consistent, I added a few trowels of cement into a bucket, then marked where that came up to with a Sharpie. Then I added sand, filling to the line 4 times, as this is a more consistent method of getting the same ratios compared to if you're doing this by counting trowels or shovel loads, as there may be discrepancies on how full said trowel or shovel is between scoops. I added and mixed the dry parts of the mix in a wheelbarrow, then slowly added water until it came together. I also threw in a splash of plasticizer to each mix, as apparently that makes it easier to work with. Having never laid bricks before, I can't really compare, but with it being my first time, I'm going to take any help I can get. It took me a few mixes to get the best results regarding how much water to add. Too little and the mortar didn't stick to the ends of the bricks very well. Too much and the mortar becomes too heavy and harder to work with. All of this was done in small batches using the shovel to flip, spread and repeat, trying to get it mixed well and with some air in there to make the mix light and easy to work with. I started laying bricks on the back wall, laying the first course. Being the back of the workshop up against the fence made this a tad awkward, but I just about managed. No one's going to see how poorly I did back here anyway, so it's a good place to practice. After laying the first brick, since I know the length of a brick and the width of the mortar, I would lay the next brick and measure the top, knocking it back until I got the total of 2 bricks plus 10 mil of mortar. For each brick I repeat this, adding a brick length plus another 10 mil, so all my spacing between the bricks is precise, and I end up at the exact spot I needed to at the corner I was heading to. This is really needed, as if you're guessing the spacing, you may end up miles off when it comes to getting to the other corner, and don't ask me how I know that. I used the string line to check the wall was straight, and kept checking with a spirit level that everything is level. I stay a millimeter or so away from the string line so not to have it snagged by one of the bricks and skew the line going forward. Once the back first course was done, it was onto the sides. I ran a tape measure along the top of the back bricks, marked with a Sharpie where 2 meters was, then did the same along the side on some bricks, placed down along the string line, marking 1.5 meters. Then putting a tape measure on the 2 meter mark, weighed down with a brick, and measured 2.5 meters to the line where their 1.5 meter mark was. This then let me fine tune the line on each side to be square from the back course of bricks. This is just the 3-4-5 rule using meters divided by 2. So after this I plodded on with the first course of bricks for the side walls, same method as before, using the tape measure to make sure the spacing was correct, and also then making sure both side walls were the same length. Then the front wall string line is fine-tuned and the first course of bricks laid there too. For the front wall though, I made sure to leave a gap for where the door will go. After spending lots of time lining up and squaring the first course, the second course was a little easier as I was just following the layer of bricks below. Once the bricks were down, DPM folds up the back of the bricks and is joined to the DPC on the top, overlapping along the back of the bricks. Initially I did this with DPM tape, but that didn't really stick as much as I wanted it to, and it was fine for the corners under the walls where the walls hold it down, but along the back to join the DPC it started to peel away after just a few days, so I changed tact. Instead I started by cleaning the DPM and DPC with a cloth and water, just to get any bits of dirt and mortar off. Then joined the two with 50mm double-sided butyl tape. After that I used some all-weather Gorilla Tape to tidy up the join, and the result was significantly better. So since these are Class B bricks, they're designed to get wet. With the DPM and DPC, no moisture can travel through the bricks into the concrete slab, internal wall, plasterboard, or up the wall studs or framing. After rain, most of the rain splash will only reach the bricks, and then those can dry out, leaving the rest of the workshop further up, such as the cladding, to last much longer. Okay, time for the costs again. I got through 2 bags of cement, 8 bags of sand, 146 bricks, a litre of plasticizer, a roll of DPC, 1 roll of DPM tape, 2 rolls of Gorilla all-weather tape, 2 double-sided butyl tape rolls. That all came to a total cost of £202 and a running total cost thus far at £2,824. That's it for now, and in the next one I'll be putting up the walls. We'll talk about moisture control and more, so I'll see you there.